If I could turn back the hands of time, I swear I'd undo it all. But what's the point of regrets when your womb is empty, your home is silent, and the man you once loved now hates the very sound of your name? I was young and angry. I caught my husband cheating not once, but many times. And instead of leaving him or confronting him like a woman should, I took matters into my own hands. I poisoned his manhood, bit by bit. Every meal, every drink, I made sure he'd never get another woman pregnant again. I thought I was winning, but the real punishment wasn't his. It was mine. Now I'm 85, and the only sound I hear in this house is the echo of my own shame. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel, where every story carries a lifetime of lessons, pain, and truth. Hit that subscribe button and join us on this unforgettable journey. They say the heart remembers what the mind tries to forget. And even though I'm 85 now, sitting in this creaky old rocking chair, I remember everything like it happened yesterday. I was just 24 when I married Henry. He was tall, smooth, and so dangerously handsome that even the preacher's wife couldn't help staring at him on our wedding day. I remember how my heart raced when he whispered in my ear, "You'll be the only woman I'll ever love." And I believed him. Oh Lord, how I believed him. Henry and I had what they called the perfect American marriage. We bought a small house with white picket fences, Sunday church, Friday night dinners, birthdays with family. It was everything a young woman could dream of. I would wake up early to iron his shirts, pack his lunch, and kiss him goodbye at the door. I was proud to be his wife, and I never once questioned if my love was enough. But life, as I later learned, doesn't always keep its promises. The first time I noticed something was wrong, it was small. He stopped calling me baby and started calling me Eloise. He no longer looked at me when I spoke, and he came home smelling like perfume I didn't own. I told myself it was in my head. Maybe he was stressed. Maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe love just gets old. But one night, it was no longer maybe. Henry left the house for what he claimed was a business meeting. I waited up for him till midnight, the food I cooked sitting cold on the table. When he finally walked in, tie loosened, shirt wrinkled, and guilt written all over his face, I didn't need a confession. I just needed confirmation, and he gave it to me in silence. From that night forward, something inside me broke. The Eloise that loved him unconditionally. She started to fade. I smiled during family gatherings. I laughed when our neighbors complimented us. But deep down, a storm was building. I told no one. I cried into my pillow, then wiped my tears and played the perfect wife. But I was burning inside. I wanted revenge, not the kind that shows up with a knife or a scandal. No. I wanted something silent, something slow, something that would make him pay for what he did, without even knowing he was paying. So I made a choice. I went to the drugstore in the next town. I asked around, did my reading, and found things legal and illegal that could slowly destroy a man's ability to father a child. Pills, herbs, powders, you name it. I masked them with honey, blended them in soup, poured them in wine. He never noticed. Each meal, each sip, I whispered to myself, "This is what you deserve, Henry. You don't get to hurt me and walk away whole." And for a while, I felt powerful. But if only I knew the kind of woman I was becoming. If only I knew that by trying to make him empty, I was slowly making myself hollow too. They say the kitchen is a woman's kingdom. For me, it became a battlefield. Every spoon I stirred, every meal I plated, wasn't just dinner, it was silent war. Henry would sit at the table, smiling, laughing at the news, thanking me for the food, not knowing I was slowly destroying his future with each bite. I didn't feel guilty. Not then. I told myself he deserved it. After all, he was still seeing her, that woman from the hair salon. Her name was Carla. A single mother of two, hips wide enough to turn heads, and a face always caked in makeup like she was headed to a magazine shoot. Henry denied everything, but I wasn't stupid. I'd seen them once, parked behind a diner in his car. He wasn't even ashamed. So yes, I drugged him. I wasn't trying to kill him, no. I just wanted to make sure no other woman ever carried his child. I wanted him to look at me every day and wonder why we weren't having kids, why his body was failing him. I wanted to be the one with the secret, the one who had control for once. But as the years rolled on, that control started feeling like a curse. It started with the doctor's visits. I remember sitting in that sterile white room, holding Henry's hand while the doctor cleared his throat and said those cold, heavy words. "Mr. Thompson, your sperm count is dangerously low. We may need further tests." Henry's face fell. Mine didn't move. I had practiced it in the mirror. More visits followed. More tests. More tears from Henry. He became quiet, withdrawn. He blamed himself, called himself broken. I pretended to comfort him, but inside, I felt justified. This was what he got for cheating, for humiliating me, for making me feel like I wasn't enough. But then came the prayers, the night vigils, the desperate begging to God. Henry would kneel at the foot of our bed and cry like a boy. "God, just one child, please." I'd lie there, eyes open, heart tight. I never expected him to break like that. I thought he'd shrug it off. I didn't realize how badly he wanted to be a father. And then I started to wonder, had I gone too far? We hit year 5 with no child. People started asking questions. My mother-in-law hinted I was barren. Friends gave me herbal teas and fertility charms. At church, women touched my stomach during prayers. The shame began to shift toward me. I began to panic. What if I had ruined both our lives? That was when weakness crept in. Loneliness began to knock on my door, quiet and constant. Henry had stopped cheating, at least as far as I could tell. But we were more like roommates than lovers. There was no passion, no spark, just silence and sadness. And in that silence, someone else filled the gap. His name was Richard. He was older, kind, and unlike Henry. He looked at me like I mattered. He was also married, but that didn't stop him. I didn't stop him either. It started with conversation, then with coffee, then with long rides and longer touches. And then, one day, I crossed a line I never thought I would. I cheated on the man I had poisoned for cheating on me. And what happened next? I never planned for it. He missed my period. At first, I thought it was stress. I'd been under so much pressure hiding my secret affair with Richard, pretending everything was fine at home and living with the guilt of what I had done to Henry. I told myself it was just delayed, nothing serious. But the days turned into weeks, and my body started whispering the truth I was too afraid to face. I was pregnant. I remember standing in the small pharmacy bathroom, staring at the 2 pink lines on the test. My knees buckled. I sat on the cold floor, clutching my chest like the truth had punched me there. At 35, after nearly a decade of infertility, I was finally going to have a baby. But it wasn't my husband's child. It was Richard's. Panic crawled through me like poison. What was I supposed to do? Henry couldn't have children, we both knew that now. We'd seen the test results. And here I was, carrying life in my womb. The same womb everyone believed was barren. If I told him, the lie I'd lived for years would unravel. He would know I cheated. He would know I was the reason he never became a father. Everything would explode. So I kept quiet. I smiled. I cooked. I rubbed my stomach in secret and rehearsed the story I'd tell him when the time was right. I convinced myself that maybe, just maybe, he'd be so overjoyed to become a father that he'd forget to question how it happened. I knew it was foolish. But when you're drowning in lies, even foolish hope feels like a lifeline. The days that followed were a strange mix of joy and fear. I'd dream of a tiny baby with curly hair and my dimples. But then I'd wake up sweating, terrified of what would happen if the truth came out. Richard, on the other hand, was no comfort. When I told him I was pregnant, his reaction was ice cold. "It's not mine," he said flatly without even blinking. "I have a family. You knew that." Just like that, he vanished from my life, like I was some temporary mistake he needed to erase. I was left alone with a baby growing inside me and a storm building around me. One evening, as Henry came home from work, he looked different. He wasn't angry or sad like usual. He looked curious, nervous. He sat down beside me, his hands trembling slightly. "I went to see another doctor today," he said. My heart dropped. He continued, "I didn't tell you before because I didn't want to raise your hopes, but Eloise, the doctor said I'm infertile. Completely infertile. I can't have children." My breath caught in my throat. That was my moment to confess, to come clean, to explain everything before it spiraled. But he smiled. I reached for his hand and whispered the words that sealed my fate. "Well, that's strange, Henry, because I'm pregnant." The room fell silent. He didn't say a word. He just stared at me like I was a stranger. His hand slipped out of mine slowly, and I could see it in his eyes the instant he realized the child I carried wasn't his. I had spent years poisoning his body, and now I had poisoned what was left of his trust. Henry didn't yell. He didn't curse. He didn't even stand up. He just sat there on the edge of the couch, his eyes fixed on my belly like it had committed a crime. And somehow, that silence hurt more than if he had screamed at me or thrown a chair across the room. I tried to speak. I tried to lie again. I mumbled something about miracles, about how maybe the test was wrong, how doctors weren't always accurate. I told him maybe God had finally answered our prayers. But Henry wasn't stupid. He slowly stood up, walked to the window, and placed his hand on the cold glass like he was touching the past, our past. Then he said it, so calm, so quiet, I almost missed it. "Whose child is it, Eloise?" My lips moved, but no words came out. How could I explain that the child in my womb belonged to another man? That while he cried in the night praying for a child, I was wrapped in another man's arms? That the infertility he wept over was never nature's doing, but mine? I couldn't. So I lied again. "I don't know." He turned to face me, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw disgust in his eyes. Not disappointment, not anger, just pure, cold disgust. "You poisoned me," he whispered. "Didn't you?" I froze. "I didn't," I began, but the words fell apart before they left my tongue. Henry nodded slowly. He wasn't asking for confirmation. He already knew. Maybe he'd known for a long time and just didn't want to believe it. Maybe the missing pills, the strange tastes in his food, the way I never once cried over our infertility, it had all been little clues. But now, with the pregnancy, all the pieces had fallen into place. He walked away that night. He packed a small bag and left without a fight, without a final word. I sat in the hallway, staring at the front door after it slammed shut, the echo bouncing off the walls like judgment. I wanted to chase him. I wanted to fall to my knees and confess everything. Beg for forgiveness. Scream that I only did it because I was hurt. But I couldn't move. My body was heavy with shame, and the weight of a child who had no idea the mess it was about to be born into. Days turned to weeks. He didn't come back. People started asking questions. Neighbors whispered. My mother-in-law stopped calling. Even church felt cold, like the walls themselves knew what I had done. The worst part? I hadn't even told the truth yet. Henry didn't know who the father was, and Richard, the real father, was nowhere to be found. He had blocked my number. His wife even sent me a warning letter through her lawyer, threatening to expose me if I ever came near her family again. I was carrying a baby no one wanted, and every time I felt it kick inside me, I cried, not because I didn't love the baby, but because I knew I had ruined the life it was coming into. One night, I stood in front of the mirror, rubbing my swollen belly, whispering to the child inside. You didn't ask for this. You didn't ask for a mother like me. And for the first time since I found out I was pregnant, I truly hated myself. By the time my belly began to show, the whispers had turned into full-blown rumors. At the grocery store, women would pause mid-conversation when I walked by. Some turned their backs, others stared openly, with that smug, pitiful look that said, "We knew." In a town like ours, secrets didn't last long, and mine had rotted straight through the walls of my house and leaked into the streets. It didn't take long before people pieced things together. Henry had left. He couldn't have children. And now, suddenly, I was pregnant. That was all they needed to write the ending. I stopped going to church. I avoided the market. Even my closest friend Darlene began to distance herself, always too busy or just stepping out when I called. I knew she was ashamed to be seen with me. And honestly, I didn't blame her. At night, the house was painfully silent. No radio playing. No Henry humming in the kitchen. Just the tick-tick-tick of the old grandfather clock, counting down the days to my labor and to a future I had destroyed with my own hands. I wrote Henry a letter once, poured everything into it, told him the truth, told him why I did what I did, how I felt humiliated and powerless watching him lie to my face and come home smelling like another woman. I told him how I wanted to hurt him without leaving a scar, but now the biggest scar was on me. I begged him to forgive me, not so we could be together, but so I could breathe again. I never got a reply, and somehow, that silence hurt more than any insult he could have hurled at me. But life, whether we're ready or not, keeps moving forward, and so did my pregnancy. As the months passed, I began to bond with the baby inside me. I didn't know if it was a boy or girl, but I began to speak to it, sing old songs to it, tell it stories about my childhood. It was the only company I had left. I'd sit by the window and imagine how I'd raise it. I told myself I'd never lie to my child, never make them feel unwanted. I'd give them everything I had left in me, even if the world hated me. Then came the day Richard's wife showed up at my front door. I'll never forget her face, sharp, cold, disgusted. She looked at me like I was a disease. She didn't say much, just handed me a white envelope and said, "This is a formal denial. Richard will not be taking responsibility for your child. Don't ever come near our family again." And just like that, the last thread of hope snapped. I was alone, completely. No husband, no friends, no support, no baby father, just me and a belly full of consequences. Still, I didn't cry that day. I just stood there at the doorway, envelope in hand, watching her walk back to her fancy car, heels clicking like justice marching away. That night, I packed my bags. I left the house Henry and I built with love and filled with lies. I left behind the memories, the shame, the neighbor's eyes, and the bedroom I once dreamed of growing old in. With nothing but my clothes, my swollen belly, and a tired soul, I boarded a bus to a new town, a place where no one knew my name, a place where I could be alone with my guilt, and give birth to the one thing I didn't plan for but now, the only thing I had left. The town I moved to was small, quiet, and nothing like the one I had left behind. It had no fancy streets, no family gossip, and best of all, no one knew who I was. I rented a single room at the back of an old widow's house. Her name was Mrs. Palmer. She was kind enough, though she asked no questions, and I was grateful for that. I told her I was a widow, traveling alone, waiting to start a new life. She nodded and offered me a cup of tea, never pressing further. That was the first time in a long while someone looked at me without judgment. I didn't deserve it, but I accepted it anyway. Pregnancy, in a place like that, was both peaceful and painful. There were no familiar faces, no wagging tongues, but there was also no love, no family, no warm hands to hold mine. Every appointment at the clinic I went alone. Every shopping trip for baby clothes I did in silence, pretending I was a widow who lost her husband to war, not to betrayal. I didn't tell anyone the truth, not even myself some days. At night, I'd lie in bed with my hands wrapped around my belly, talking to the baby like they were my only friend. "You'll be better than me," I whispered. "You won't lie. You won't cheat. You'll walk through life with your head up, not bent in shame like your mother." Sometimes I'd feel a soft kick and smile through my tears. Other times I'd remember Henry's face when I told him I was pregnant, and the tears would choke me. I wrote letters. I never mailed one to Henry, one to the child's real father, and one to myself. I'd pour every regret onto those pages, every what if, every foolish choice. I kept them in a shoebox under my bed, too ashamed to send them, too broken to throw them away. Mrs. Palmer would bring me warm soup on cold nights. She said little, but I think she sensed my sorrow. She had the eyes of someone who had lost more than words could explain. Once, she asked me gently, "Was the father a good man?" I froze. I opened my mouth, but nothing came. I smiled instead and said, "He didn't stay." She gave a small nod, like she understood far more than I had confessed. Then she left me alone. The weeks passed. My belly grew. So did the weight of everything I'd buried. I had escaped the whispers, but I couldn't escape my thoughts. They followed me everywhere while cooking, while bathing, even in the silence before sleep. I began dreaming of Henry. Not the angry Henry, not the heartbroken one, but the Henry I first fell in love with. The one who used to pick flowers from neighbors' gardens and bring them home just to see me smile. The one who held my hand during storms and kissed my forehead before bed. That version of him haunted me, because he didn't deserve what I did to him. Not fully. Yes, he cheated. Yes, he betrayed me. But what I did wasn't justice, it was vengeance dressed as power. And in the end, it left both of us empty. As the days inched closer to my due date, the fear grew louder. What kind of mother would I be? Would my child look into my eyes and see the lies? Would they one day ask me, "Mom, where's my father?" And would I be brave enough to answer? I didn't know. All I knew was that I had run far, but the past was still right behind me. The day I gave birth, the sky was gray, and the wind howled like it was mourning something I hadn't yet lost. I was alone in that small-town clinic, no hand to hold. No camera flashes, no anxious husband pacing the hallway. Just me, the nurses, and a deep, aching silence. Labor was long. The pain was sharp, biting, and relentless. I remember biting down on the edge of a pillow to stop myself from screaming, because I didn't want to seem weak. I had already done too much pretending I didn't want them to see me broken, too. After what felt like a lifetime, I heard it. A cry. A piercing, angry, beautiful cry. The kind that shatters whatever armor you're wearing and reminds you that life is real. And here, they handed me a little boy. My son. He was warm and small and wrinkled, with tiny fists clenched like he'd already come out fighting. The moment our skin touched, something inside me cracked. All the walls I'd built, all the bitterness, all the shame, none of it mattered, because I had never known a love like this. Not ever. I named him Emery. It means brave or powerful, because despite all the mess I had created, this boy was innocent. He didn't choose this story. I did, and he deserved a name that stood stronger than my past. But the joy was short-lived. A nurse later came in with a clipboard and asked, "Father's name for the birth certificate?" I froze. I stared at that blank space like it was a grave I was digging with my own hands. I wanted to write something, anything, but I couldn't lie again. Not officially. Not in ink. So I whispered, "Leave it blank." She looked at me, then nodded without a word, but I saw the pity in her eyes. I hated it, but I understood it. I left the clinic 2 days later, holding Emery in my arms and a storm in my chest. Mrs. Palmer had prepared a small crib in my room, and when she saw him, she smiled softly. "He looks like you," she said. I nodded, grateful that at least Emery wouldn't carry the face of a man who abandoned us. The days that followed were the most beautiful and terrifying of my life. Emery cried through the nights, and I rocked him with trembling arms, whispering lullabies and promises I wasn't even sure I could keep. I promised him love. I promised him honesty. I promised him I'd never let my past decide his future. But deep down I was scared. Scared he'd grow up and ask me questions I wasn't ready to answer. Scared he'd go searching for the truth and find a version of me I no longer wanted to be. Scared that one day I'd look him in the eye and see Henry. Because no matter how far I had run, the truth never stopped chasing me. Sometimes, I'd stare at Emery while he slept and wonder what if I had just walked away instead of choosing revenge. What if I had healed instead of hurt? Would Henry and I have found our way back? Would Emery have been born into a home filled with love, not secrets? But what ifs don't change the past. They just haunt the present. And every time my baby cried in the dark, I'd hold him close and whisper, "I'll be better than I was, because you deserve better than I had." Months passed. Emery began to smile. He'd follow the sound of my voice, reach out from my face, and curl his little fingers around mine like he never wanted to let go. He was my everything, my reason to keep going, to wake up, to eat, to breathe. But in the quiet moments, when he was asleep and the house was still, I would sit by the window and think about the life I left behind. Not because I missed the marriage, but because I knew I had never truly owned up to what I did. Henry deserved to know the whole truth. He deserved to hear it not from gossip, not from assumptions, but from me. So one night, I lit a candle, took out a sheet of paper, and began to write. "Dear Henry, if you're reading this, it means I finally gathered the courage to put my shame into words. Not excuses, not stories, just truth. Because even if you never forgive me, you deserve to know everything. I poisoned you. I started doing it after I caught you cheating, yes, more than once. I couldn't confront you, couldn't walk away, so I chose revenge. I wanted to punish you silently, without bruises or noise. I slipped pills into your food, not to kill you, but to destroy your future. And I succeeded. When the doctor said you were infertile, you believed it was fate. I knew it was me, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. The anger had turned into something darker, and it was eating me from the inside. And then I did something even worse. I stepped out. Just once. It wasn't love. It wasn't right. It was weakness. I was lonely, and for a brief moment, I let someone else touch a part of me that should have stayed yours. That night gave me a son, a child I never thought I'd have, but it cost me everything else. You walked away, and I don't blame you. I destroyed the very thing we were trying to build, and I'll carry that guilt until my last breath. This letter isn't to ask for anything. Not forgiveness, not sympathy, just truth. That's all. I hope you found peace, even if I never deserved to be part of it. Eloise. I folded the letter carefully, placed it in an envelope, and sealed it with trembling hands. But I never mailed it. For days, it sat on my nightstand, staring at me like a loaded gun. I picked it up several times, walked to the post office, even waited in line once. But when I got to the counter, I couldn't do it. I turned around, clutched it to my chest, and walked home in silence. Not because I didn't mean every word, but because I didn't know if opening that door again would heal anything, or just reopen wounds that were already rotting. Instead, I placed the letter inside the shoebox under my bed, alongside all the others I had written in the past months. That box was my graveyard of guilt, and I wasn't ready to let any of it go yet. I poured everything into raising Emery. I gave him my time, my stories, my laughter even when it felt forced. And as he grew, he gave me something back. Small moments of peace. Moments where, for just a second, I believed I could be a good mother after all. But the past has a cruel way of circling back. And one day, it did. I remember the morning too clearly. It was the kind of day that tricked you into thinking everything was fine. The sun came up soft and golden. Emery was humming a tune from his favorite cartoon while eating the cereal we could barely afford. He was growing fast, too fast for my worn-out shoes and hand-me-down clothes to keep up. He had just turned 3. That morning, he wasn't feeling great. His forehead was warm, but I brushed it off as one of those childhood fevers that came and went like wind. Money was tight. I couldn't afford a hospital bill. Not after scraping by with cleaning jobs, late-night shifts, and barely enough to keep the lights on. But by noon, he wasn't humming anymore. His eyes had gone dull, and he was struggling to breathe. I panicked. I ran into the street, screaming for help like a mad woman. I didn't care who saw me or what they thought. My baby, my only baby, was slipping away in my arms. A neighbor helped drive us to the nearest emergency clinic. I held Emery tightly in the back seat, whispering, "You'll be okay, sweetheart. Mama's here. Just hang on." But when we arrived, it was too late. The nurse looked at me with that trained softness they give to grieving parents. Her lips moved, but I didn't hear anything. My hands were still clinging to Emery's tiny frame, rocking him back and forth as if I could sing life back into his lungs. I screamed so loudly they had to sedate me. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed, alone, and Emery, my miracle child, my reason to keep going after everything I had lost, was gone. Just like that, gone. I don't remember the funeral clearly. Some kind strangers helped raise funds. One of the nurses gave me a small white coffin and told me to write him a letter. I sat in my empty apartment that night and wrote, "Dear Emery, I ruined everything before you came. I ruined my marriage. I ruined my peace. But you were the one thing I never regretted. You were my redemption. I'm sorry I brought you into a world full of lies. I'm sorry I couldn't give you more. I loved you more than life itself. And now that you're gone, I don't know who I am anymore. Love, Mama." I buried that letter with him. After the burial, I came back to silence. Not the silence of peace, but the hollow kind. The kind that echoes through your chest like a canyon. For years, I thought the worst pain was catching Henry cheating. I thought it was losing my pride, losing my marriage. But no, the worst pain in the world is losing a child you sacrificed everything to protect. The worst pain is realizing you can't even be mad at anyone but yourself. I made choices I can never undo. I destroyed the man I once loved. I tried to fix my pain with revenge. And now, even the tiny bit of happiness I fought for is buried 6 feet under. I sit in that quiet room every night, staring at the walls, wondering what kind of woman I became. Not a wife, not a mother, just a tired, bitter shell of someone who once thought she could outsmart karma. But karma, it always finds its way back, even if it has to knock on your door, carrying a child-sized coffin. They say old age brings wisdom, but for some of us, it brings a haunting silence, filled with the echoes of choices we wish we never made. I am 85 now, and though my body is frail and my hair snow white, the weight of my past is heavier than ever. Sometimes, I sit by the window and watch the children from the neighborhood run and play. Their laughter stabs at my heart like little knives. Because I once had that joy, just for a short while, and I lost it. Not to fate, not to sickness, but to the consequences of a bitter heart. People often ask me why I never remarried, why I live alone, why no child comes around to visit me. I usually smile and say, life just turned out this way. But the truth is, life didn't do this to me. I did this to myself. If I could turn back time, I would have walked away from Henry the first time he cheated. I would have left with my pride intact. I wouldn't have fed him poison. I wouldn't have let hate win. Because when you move out of hurt, you don't heal, you bleed more. I thought I was teaching him a lesson, but I ended up writing a tragedy for us both. And the man I committed adultery with? He vanished like a coward. The very moment I told him I was pregnant, he distanced himself. A married man, just like Henry. No different. I repeated the same betrayal I once cried over. Only this time, it cost me everything. And my son, my precious Emery, he died without ever knowing the truth about his mother. That I was broken. That I tried but I failed. That I loved him more than anything. Even if the world called him a mistake, he was never a mistake to me. He was the only thing that ever felt right. Now, in this quiet house, I talk to the walls and pray to a God I used to ignore. I ask for forgiveness, not because I deserve it, but because I can't carry this guilt anymore. It eats me from the inside, and every night, I close my eyes hoping I'll see Emery in my dreams. Just once more. So if you're listening to my story, learn from me. Don't let pain turn you into the villain of your own life. Don't try to destroy someone else just because they hurt you. Walk away. Start over. Heal in peace. Because revenge doesn't heal wounds, it deepens them. And most of all, treasure the people you love. Be honest, be kind, and never ever choose hate over healing. This is my story. A story of love lost, of revenge taken, of a child gone too soon, and a woman left alone with her regrets. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button to support more powerful stories like this. Drop a comment and let us know. Was what she did right or wrong? And tell us where you're watching from. Your voice matters on this journey of learning and healing. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and never let bitterness write your story.